Elliot Graves took a deep breath as he stood at the entrance to the United Stellar Compact's Grand Council chamber. The vast hall shimmered with holographic projections of countless worlds, each symbolizing the unity of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Yet, despite the grandeur, there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. Today, the Valorax would formally challenge humanity's place in this galactic order. Elliot adjusted his diplomatic sash, a ceremonial relic from Earth's traditions, and stepped forward. His heart pounded, not just from the gravity of the moment but from the weight of representing humanity in a galaxy where their species' role was anything but secure. Unlike other species, humans were granted unusual freedoms in diplomatic conduct, freedoms that some admired but many resented. "Human delegate, the council awaits your presence," a synthesized voice intoned. Elliot entered the chamber, his eyes scanning the sea of alien faces. The Valorax delegation sat at the far end, their obsidian scales glinting under the chamber's light. Their leader, High Arbiter Crovales, emanated authority, his four glowing eyes fixed on Elliot with an expression that could only be described as disdain. As Elliot reached the center podium, a holographic projection of the Compact's insignia illuminated the space around him. The presiding moderator, a crystalline entity named Voltaire, spoke first, their voice resonating like wind chimes. "Today, the Valorax delegation brings forth a motion to revoke the diplomatic exceptions granted to the Terran species. High Arbiter Crovales, you may present your case." Crovales rose with an almost regal elegance, his deep voice commanding attention. The Compact was founded on principles of unity, order, and mutual respect. Yet, humans flout these principles at every turn. They deviate from established protocols, inject chaos into delicate negotiations, and operate without the discipline that binds the rest of us. This cannot continue. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, many delegates nodding in agreement. Elliot remained silent, his mind racing to find the right approach. Crovales continued, his tone growing sharper. "While some may argue that humans bring a unique perspective, what they truly offer is recklessness. Are we to build a stable galaxy on the foundation of unpredictability? I urge this council to revoke their exceptions and enforce standard diplomatic conduct upon the Terrans." The Valorax leader sat down, his words leaving a heavy silence in their wake. Voltaire turned their faceted gaze to Elliot. "Human representative, the floor is yours." Elliot stepped forward, exhaling slowly. He knew he couldn't rely on traditional rhetoric. That wasn't humanity's strength. Instead, he drew upon the very quality under scrutiny, his adaptability. "Esteemed council members," Elliot began, his voice steady but warm. "I understand the concerns raised by the Valorax. To outsiders, humanity's methods might seem chaotic or even improper. But I ask you to consider, has chaos ever been an inherent evil, or can it be a force for progress?" A few heads tilted, intrigued. Elliot pressed on. "In the past century alone, humans have mediated some of the Compact's most intractable conflicts. When the Krelix and the Tharn nearly went to war over resource disputes, it was a human envoy who brokered peace, not by following protocol, but by thinking outside of it. The envoy proposed a shared mining operation, something neither side had considered because it wasn't within the rules. That solution saved millions of lives." He paused, letting the memory settle. "When the Oralen sought allies for a humanitarian crisis on their homeworld, many here declined because formal agreements didn't mandate assistance. But humanity acted. We didn't wait for permission, we simply acted, because empathy drove us more than protocol ever could." Crovales interjected, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Empathy is admirable in theory, but it is a weak foundation for governance." Elliot turned to face the Valorax leader directly, his tone firm but respectful. "Empathy isn't weakness, Arbiter Crovales. It's the glue that binds species across unimaginable divides. Without it, this council wouldn't exist." He pivoted back to the larger assembly. "Humanity's adaptability, our ability to see beyond rigid structures, is not a flaw, it's our greatest contribution to this compact. We fill the gaps when tradition fails. We resolve disputes not because we reject the rules, but because we know when to bend them for the greater good. The murmurs grew louder, this time with a mix of agreement and dissent. Elliot could feel the room's attention sharpening, every delegate weighing his words. Ask yourselves this, he continued, his voice rising slightly. How many crises have been averted because a human saw an opportunity no one else could? How many alliances forged because we dared to approach problems differently? Humanity's exceptions are not privileges, they are tools the Compact uses to adapt, to grow, and to survive in an ever-changing galaxy. He stepped back, allowing his words to linger. The silence was heavy but not hostile. Walter broke it with a crystalline chime. The Council will deliberate. This session is adjourned for now. As the delegates began to disperse, Elliot caught the gaze of Crovales once more. The Valorax leader's expression was unreadable, but there was no mistaking the tension between them. This battle was far from over. The Council's adjournment gave Elliot time to delve deeper into the history of the United Stellar Compact and humanity's unique place within it. He pored over records stored in the Compact's vast archives, accessed through the shared network of member species. The data stretched back millennia, recounting how the Compact was formed to bring order to a chaotic galaxy of competing empires. Yet, as he reviewed case after case of interstellar diplomacy, a pattern emerged. In nearly every instance where humanity had intervened, the established rules and protocols of the Compact had proven insufficient. Humans had brokered peace, negotiated treaties, and resolved conflicts by doing what others could not, bending the rigid frameworks that constrained other species. Elliot leaned back in his chair, letting the implications settle. These moments weren't just historical footnotes, they were evidence of humanity's distinct role. But why had the Compact granted humans these exceptions in the first place? Why had the founders allowed a species so far removed from the galactic norms to operate differently? A notification broke his thoughts. An anonymous message had been sent to his console. Seek the Council's Genesis records, it read. The Genesis records were sealed, accessible only to the Compact's highest authorities. Whoever sent this message was taking a risk, and they wanted Elliot to take one too. Driven by curiosity, he turned to the next best source, individual testimonies. Over the years, countless species had filed reports on humanity's contributions. Among them, 3 examples stood out. The first detailed a standoff between the Erixel and the Vupri, 2 species locked in a bitter territorial dispute. For years, their negotiations had stalled, as both sides refused to cede even a millimeter of ground. When a human diplomat arrived, they bypassed the formalities entirely. Instead, the envoy initiated a casual conversation with both factions, making light of their shared love of competitive strategy games. It was a simple, disarming gesture, but it broke the ice. Within weeks, the 2 sides had not only resolved the dispute but had established a trade agreement. The second report recounted a cultural misunderstanding that nearly led to war between the aquatic Selenari and the gaseous Kilix. The Selenari viewed the Kilix invasion of their waters as an act of hostility, unaware that the Kilix had no concept of physical boundaries. A human mediator, after observing both species, used analogies from Earth, specifically migratory fish and weather patterns, to bridge the gap. The Selenari came to understand that the Kilix were not invaders but nomads. A treaty was signed, establishing coexistence. The final report was the most striking. It involved the Krelix-Darren War, one of the deadliest conflicts in the Compact's history. The 2 species had exhausted all diplomatic channels, with millions dying on both sides. A human diplomat proposed a solution that baffled even the most seasoned negotiators, a ceasefire predicated on a temporary cultural exchange. Soldiers and civilians from each side were sent to live among the other, learning their languages, rituals, and ways of life. It was a gamble that could have backfired spectacularly, but instead, it fostered empathy and ended the war. Elliot closed the reports, his thoughts racing. These examples underscored the essence of humanity's approach: lateral thinking, emotional intelligence, and a willingness to take risks. But they also highlighted the resentment brewing among some species. For every success, there were those who felt overshadowed, their contributions diminished by humanity's unorthodox methods. One of these species, of course, was the Valorax. To better understand their hostility, Elliot studied their culture. The Valorax prided themselves on precision and tradition, their every decision guided by algorithms refined over millennia. They viewed deviation as dangerous, even heretical. To them, humanity's unpredictability wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a threat to the very order they cherished. A conversation with a fellow delegate reinforced this perspective. Nayland, a representative of the Photonic Solaris, explained, the Valorax see chaos as weakness. They believe that without strict adherence to protocol, the galaxy would fall into disorder. Humans represent the opposite of their ideals. To them, you're not just an exception, you're an aberration. But Nayland also provided insight into a curious contradiction. Despite their disdain, the Valorax have quietly benefited from human diplomacy. There are instances where your methods have indirectly stabilized their interests. They'll never admit it, but they need you more than they let on. Elliot pondered this paradox. It wasn't just the Valorax, many species had similar conflicted feelings about humanity. They admired the results but resented the means. To secure humanity's place, he needed to address both the admiration and the resentment. His thoughts returned to the anonymous message. The Genesis records. What could they reveal that wasn't already in the archives? With a sense of resolve, Elliot decided to pursue them. If humanity's role in the compact had deeper roots, he needed to uncover them before the next council session. The truth, whatever it was, could be the key to saving humanity's exceptional status. Elliot's determination to uncover the secrets of the compact's founding led him to the heart of the Genesis records, a vault containing the most guarded information about the formation of the United Stellar Compact. With help from a trusted ally in the Solaris delegation, Elliot accessed the restricted section. The records were a labyrinth of encoded texts and holographic logs, many written in long-forgotten languages, but there was one entry that stood out. It contained a cryptic message from the Compact's founding council. The message hinted at the presence of a species with inherent disorder, whose role in the galaxy was to act as a balancing force, a species capable of resolving deadlocks by introducing unpredictability. The records didn't identify this species by name, but the description was unmistakable: it was humanity. The founders of the Compact had deliberately chosen to include a species like Earth's inhabitants, whose capacity for chaos and improvisation would be essential when the rigid structures of the Compact failed. Elliot leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. If the founders of the Compact had envisioned humanity in this way, it wasn't just a matter of human nature being a happy accident, it was a calculated decision, a failsafe built into the very foundation of galactic diplomacy. He couldn't wait to present this to the Council, but first, he had to deal with the mounting pressure from those who viewed humanity's role as a threat. The Valorax were not the only species growing resentful of humanity's diplomatic privileges. Several others, particularly the Xantari and the Ilxi, had grown disillusioned by the success of human diplomacy. The Xantari, a race of hyperlogical beings, believed that the human approach undermined their own ability to reach agreements based on pure reason. The Ilxi, a militaristic species, resented the peaceful nature of human diplomacy and viewed it as a challenge to their own aggressive tactics. Both factions had made clear their desire to see humanity's exceptions revoked. Elliot's days were becoming a blur of sabotage attempts and veiled threats. His communications were being intercepted, and his schedule constantly rearranged in an attempt to delay his progress. The most blatant attempt came when an assassination plot was uncovered just hours before he was scheduled to meet with a key ally. The plan had been orchestrated by a faction of the Xantari who saw Elliot as the key to preserving humanity's place. Their belief was that without Elliot's diplomatic influence, humanity's exceptional status would collapse under the weight of mounting opposition. Elliot's security team managed to prevent the attempt, but the message was clear: humanity's enemies were growing desperate. To counter this growing resentment, Elliot knew he had to make humanity's case in a more direct, personal way. He invited a select group of delegates from various species to Earth itself, hoping that first-hand experience with humanity's unique qualities would shift their perspectives. The delegates were skeptical, but they agreed to the visit, uncertain of what they would learn. The first stop on the tour was a local art gallery, where human improvisation was on full display. The delegates watched as a group of Earth's artists, known for their spontaneous and unstructured approach, created pieces in real time. The art was unpredictable, chaotic even, but also deeply moving. One of the Ilksey diplomats, who had been quiet throughout the visit, finally spoke up. I don't understand it. The lack of order, the randomness. Yet, there's something about it that resonates. Elliot smiled, knowing this moment was crucial. That's the heart of humanity, seeing beauty in the chaos. We thrive on unpredictability because it allows for growth and innovation. We can't always predict the outcome, but we're willing to take the risk. From there, they moved on to a human sporting event, an improv football game, where the rules constantly changed based on the players' creativity. The delegates watched in confusion as players juggled multiple objectives, their strategies constantly evolving. At first, the Ilksey and Zantari diplomats were baffled by the apparent lack of structure. But slowly, they began to see the underlying beauty of the game. The constant change, the adaptability of the players, and their ability to react to unforeseen circumstances mirrored humanity's approach to diplomacy. Your species is not bound by what is expected, the Zantari delegate remarked, a touch of admiration creeping into their voice. You create solutions out of nothing. The final stop was a human dinner, where the diplomats shared a meal that spanned multiple cultures. Each dish represented a different part of Earth's history, from ancient grain dishes to the spicy flavors of more modern cuisines. The diplomats were hesitant at first, unsure of the unfamiliar tastes, but the experience brought them closer together. They discovered that, like the meal, humanity's strength lay in diversity. Every difference brought something valuable to the table. Over the course of the visit, Elliot noticed a subtle shift in the diplomats' attitudes. They began to ask questions about Earth's history, its rise to power, and the role humanity had played in the galaxy's most significant peace agreements. By the end of the tour, many had become more receptive to humanity's unique place within the compact. Even the Ilksey delegate, who had been the most vocal in opposition to humanity's exceptions, admitted that their approach had merits. But the real breakthrough came when Elliot received a private message from a trusted contact within the Valorax delegation. The message was short and cryptic: the Valorax will not be swayed by charm alone. They will demand proof. Elliot knew what that meant. The Valorax were not interested in rhetoric or cultural exchange, they wanted concrete evidence that humanity's methods could work in the most challenging situations. This revelation was both a challenge and an opportunity. Elliot had already prepared for this. He would have to demonstrate that humanity's approach to diplomacy was not just theoretical, but practical, and that it had real, measurable results. The council session was fast approaching, and Elliot knew the real battle lay ahead. The stakes were higher than ever, and humanity's place in the galaxy rested on his shoulders. He couldn't afford to fail. The day of the council vote arrived, and Elliot stood at the heart of the United Stellar Compact's grand chamber once again. The air was thick with anticipation, and the tension in the room was palpable. The Valorax, Zantari, Ilksey, and countless other species had all gathered to decide humanity's future within the galactic order. At stake was not only humanity's diplomatic privileges but the very essence of their role in the compact. Elliot had spent the past few days preparing for this moment, gathering allies, reviewing humanity's contributions, and organizing a final, irrefutable demonstration of why humanity's exceptions were not just desirable but essential. The diplomatic exchange on Earth had shifted perceptions, but that was only the beginning. Today, Elliot would make his case clear to the entire galaxy. As the proceedings began, the atmosphere was charged with a mixture of hope and fear. Elliot could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had seen this moment coming for weeks, the inevitable confrontation between those who viewed humanity as a necessary force for balance and those who saw their unpredictability as a liability. But now, it was time to speak the truth. Voltaire, the crystalline moderator, called the session to order. Esteemed delegates, we now proceed with the vote on whether to revoke or maintain the diplomatic exceptions granted to the Terran species. The decision is in your hands. The Valorax delegation was the first to speak, as expected. High Arbiter Crovalis stood, his 4 eyes glowing with a cold intensity. The Valorax have long advocated for order and structure, for a system where every action has a predictable consequence. Humanity's approach, full of improvisation and unpredictability, is a direct challenge to that order. We have seen the chaos it has caused, and we cannot stand by while it destabilizes the compact. Elliot felt the weight of Crovalis's words, but he was prepared. He rose, his voice calm yet filled with conviction. I understand the concerns raised by the Valorax. But I ask you to consider this: order, without flexibility, is a prison. Without the ability to adapt, the compact would have crumbled under the weight of stagnation long ago. He paused, letting the words sink in. Humanity's unique strength lies in our ability to improvise, to find solutions where others see none. We have saved countless lives, brokered impossible peace agreements, and resolved conflicts not through rigid adherence to the rules, but by recognizing when those rules fail. That is not chaos, it is creativity. And it is what allows us to survive and thrive. The delegates were listening now, some nodding, others exchanging uncertain glances. But Elliot knew that this wasn't enough. He needed to show them, not just tell them. He had one final, unassailable argument to make. Elliot motioned to the holographic projection in the center of the chamber, which flickered to life, displaying an image of the Krulix-Terran War. The two species had been locked in an intractable conflict for decades, each side entrenched in their demands, each unwilling to compromise. For years, no amount of formal diplomacy had brought them closer to peace. But then came the human diplomat, who proposed an unprecedented cultural exchange, one that seemed absurd to everyone involved. Soldiers from both sides were sent to live among the other, experiencing their customs, their lives. The result was nothing short of miraculous. The war ended, and a lasting peace was established. This is not an isolated case, Elliot continued. Humanity has brought peace to species that thought they were beyond reconciliation. We have resolved conflicts by seeing beyond the limitations of established protocols. The Krulix and the Terran didn't want peace, they wanted victory. And yet, by offering them something no one else could, we brought them to the table. He let the hologram fade and turned to face the chamber once more. The compact was founded on the belief that unity and order would bring stability to the galaxy. But what happens when that stability falters? When the old ways no longer work? Humanity is the answer to that question. We are the fire that keeps the galaxy from freezing into complacency. Without us, the compact would stagnate, unable to adapt to the challenges of a rapidly changing universe. The room was silent as Elliot's words reverberated through the chamber. Even Crovalis seemed taken aback, his eyes flickering with doubt. The moment of truth had arrived. Some of you will vote against us, Elliot continued, his voice softening. You will choose the easy path, the path of order, of predictability. But remember this: humanity is not the cause of disorder. We are the ones who restore balance when everything else falls apart. We are the ones who offer solutions when others only offer conflict. He stepped forward, meeting the eyes of the council members. The founders of this compact did not foresee a perfect, orderly galaxy. They foresaw a galaxy that would need flexibility, creativity, and yes, chaos. And they gave humanity the responsibility to provide that. Walter's voice broke the silence, ringing through the chamber. It is time to vote. Elliot stood still, his heart racing. He knew the decision was out of his hands now. The council members raised their hands, one by one, casting their votes. He could see the indecision in the faces of many. This was not an easy decision. It was a question of what the galaxy valued more: stability or adaptability, order or creativity. The final count was announced, and for a moment, time seemed to stretch. The result was clear: humanity's exceptions would remain. The council had voted overwhelmingly to uphold humanity's unique role in the compact. As the room erupted in applause, Elliot allowed himself a brief moment of relief. Humanity had won, But this victory was not just his own, it was the galaxy's victory. The galaxy had recognized the value of humanity's unpredictable nature, and in doing so, they had embraced the very essence of what it meant to be human. The compact was stronger for it. But as he looked toward the Valorax delegation, he knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there would always be those who resented humanity's place. But for now, Elliot had secured humanity's future, not through force, but through the one thing no other species could offer, humanity's boundless potential for change.